Hello, everyone. Welcome back to class. I hope you all are doing well today. Today, we're going to start talking about sectionalism again. We're going to talk about the revolts and the rebellions that were led by some of the slaves and some of the abolitionist leaders at the time. We're also going to look at the election of 1860, which is the election where Abraham Lincoln is chosen as our next president. Some people talk about how this is where the Civil War really gets its start and its cause for the South to secede and begin revolting against the United States. So let's go ahead and start with our notes. What you need for today. I'm going to hide this so you can see a little better. Go ahead and pause your video if you need to. Make an outline for today's notes. These are the topics that we'll be discussing. And you can kind of do this one by one, or you can make a chart just like this one. It's up to you. But go ahead and pause and write these down. Okay. So hopefully, those of you that have been watching this, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to come to class and listen and take notes. I know that listening to somebody talk on a video is not that fun, but it's the best we've got for right now. So hopefully this has been helping you and it's been meaningful. If you're still having issues, please come to a live session and discuss your issues with me so that we can get any questions answered that you may have. Okay. So let's talk about these slave revolts. There were times, there's hundreds of documented cases of slaves revolting against their slave owners or the plantation owners around them. One of the most famous is Nat Turner. Nat Turner, he was a slave, and he led a rebellion that killed over 50 white people. So we're going to watch a video right now about Nat Turner, and we'll just watch this together and learn about his rebellion together.
Here's the story of Nat Turner's rebellion. Once upon a time, there was a slave named Nat Turner. He stood about 5'7", weighed about 155 pounds, and was very smart. He lived on a plantation in Southampton County, Virginia. He often had visions, which he interpreted as messages from God. Because of this, he believed he was destined for some great mission. At an early age, he taught himself how to read and write. As he grew older, he learned how to manipulate his white slave masters. He was very disciplined, refusing tobacco and liquor, and spent much time fasting and meditating. Many other slaves began to look to Turner for leadership, and he became a preacher as a young man. On May 12, 1828, when Turner was 27 years old, he heard a voice while working in his owner's fields. The voice said the time was fast approaching when the first should be last and the last should be first. On February 11, 1831, Turner witnessed a solar eclipse and believed it was a sign from God to rise up and rebel. Turner began secretly spreading the word about his plans. On August 13, 1831, an atmospheric disturbance made the sun appear bluish-green. Turner decided this was the final signal, and 1 week later, he and 6 men gathered, and Turner laid out his plan. Using no guns and only knives, hatchets, and axes, they would kill all slave owners they could find, regardless of age or sex. One historian states that Turner called on his group to, quote, kill all the white people. The rebels then traveled from house to house and killed every white person they encountered. Though they did spare a few of the poorer white homes, they ended up killing non-slave owners, women, and even children. A small child who hid in a fireplace was among the few survivors. Most were hacked to death with axes, stabbed, or beaten to death. Through the night, Turner's forces grew as he had thought it would. First a dozen, then 30, then 60, and perhaps got as high as 80 slaves. They killed approximately 60 before they were defeated by a local militia with twice the manpower. The next day, troops from as far away as Norfolk came to help. The white troops had guns, and the slaves did not. The rebellion was ended within 2 days. As many as 200 blacks were killed in the skirmish, and later 56 blacks were executed by the state for the rebellion. This means the number of black victims was much greater than the number of rebels or of white victims. The blacks who were executed had their heads cut off. The heads were mounted on large poles at busy intersections as a warning to other slaves. As for Nat Turner, he escaped and went into hiding, but on October 30th, he surrendered to authorities. In court, he pled not guilty, saying he felt no guilt. He was hung on November 11th. Afterwards, his body was skinned and chopped up into 4 pieces. Nat Turner's slave rebellion caused white people throughout the South to freak out and overreact. It also gave hope to slaves throughout the South that maybe slavery was on the decline. The biggest legal reaction to the rebellion? The Virginia General Assembly made it illegal to educate slaves. They couldn't read or write. You see, the smarter a slave was, the more they realized being a slave sucked. The end.
So you can tell that these revolts at times were very violent. So it said that he killed anywhere between 50 and 60 white people, not just him, but all the slaves that rose up with him. And in return for that, uh, hundreds of those slaves were killed as a result of the backlash caused by the white forces coming in to stop their rebellion. Another person that we want to talk about is John Brown. Now, John Brown, he was the one who led a raid in Harper's Ferry in Virginia. We've heard his name before. He was part of the revolts in Kansas during Bleeding Kansas. While he was in Kansas, because there was so much violence going on there, he was never arrested and taken uh, away from his home because there was so much civil unrest there. However, in this one, um, in this raid at Harper's Ferry, this rebellion was ended quickly, and he was captured and he was executed. So we're going to watch a couple videos here about John Brown and his raid on Harper's Ferry. Um, he was this was in 1859, so this was after some time had passed between Bleeding Kansas and now. But here's the first video that I want to show you.
John Brown is probably the most controversial figure of the 19th century. He was so completely dedicated to eradicating the evil of slavery that he was willing to countenance absolutely anything towards that end. In 1856, he murdered 5 men in the Kansas Territory who were attempting to make Kansas into a slave state. 3 years later, in 1859, he led a group of 21 men into Virginia. They went to the armory at Harper's Ferry, took it over, seized the weapons. They were planning to arm the slaves who would join them and then lead a march into the Deep South to free all the slaves. The adventure's poorly planned. It never had a chance of succeeding. It was a catastrophe. He was put on trial, and within a month he was convicted and hung. But what's interesting is what happens afterwards. Initially, the North's response to the raid was it was outrageous. But during the course of his trial, people began to see him as a man of dignity and ultimately somebody who was willing to die for his cause. On the other hand, for the South, at least for the white South, he was their terrorist nightmare. They feared that Northerners were crazy, that they were going to come down and violently end slavery, and John Brown was the living embodiment of that dream. So even though the raid was a complete failure in Brown's own terms, it ended up polarizing the North and the South, hastening the Civil War, and therefore ultimately helping to free the slaves.
Okay. So as you can tell, John Brown, his revolt was also very violent and deadly. Now, unfortunately for John Brown, he was not very well planned out. He did not have this organized quite as well as he should have if he wanted to see a real revolt take place. They were able to stop him pretty quickly. Once they caught him, they charged him with treason, charged him with murder, and just months later, he was hung for his crimes. Now, at the trial, he gave a speech where he addressed the court about his actions. And this video here, I want you to listen to what he had to say, and I want you to think about: does he sound like he's sorry for what he did? Does he sound like he is remorseful, or is he justified? So listen to this speech here and think about what is his feeling, what is he thinking.
He addresses the court that would sentence him to hang.
In the first place, I deny everything but what I have all along admitted. Design on my part to free the slaves. Had I so interfered in behalf of the rich, powerful, the intelligent, the so-called great, or any of that class, and suffered and sacrificed what I have in this interference, it would have been all right. And every man in this courtroom would have deemed it an act worthy of reward rather than punishment. I believe that to have interfered, as I have done, as I have always freely admitted I have done, was not wrong, but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, and mingle my blood with the blood of my children, and with the blood of millions in this slave country, whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I submit, so let it be done.
So, in that speech, he's talking about his actions, and he's talking about how he did it for a reason. And if it means him dying because of it, then he would. Now, initially, people in the North and the South were outraged by this. Southerners were angry because here he is going off and killing people just because they're part of the South. They're slave owners. Northerners thought, man, this is not okay. You can't do this. You're gonna cause a war here. Not everybody is willing to go kill slave owners for what they believe in. But eventually, after the trial, many people in the North saw him as a martyr. Okay, so this is a word that some of you may not have heard before, but the word martyr is basically someone who dies for their beliefs, and he was willing to die to help end slavery. And that's what he's talking about in that speech. There is, if this helps bring an end to slavery, then I did it for a reason. Okay, so that's John Brown. Now, the Northerners, like I said before, at first they condemned what he did, and they said this was not okay. But eventually, they saw this as the next step to freeing the slaves. Southerners were very upset by this. They said that this is not the way that we should be treated because of our beliefs. And if he's claiming to be a martyr because of doing something that's right, then that's just a slap in the face to people in the South. He's basically saying he's better than them, and that what he believes in is more justified than what people in the South believe in. And if there's other people in the North that think the same way as him, then what's to stop them from coming in and killing people without some sort of punishment? So they did put John Brown to death for murder, and he paid for his crimes. But again, this is a step towards a fight or a war over slavery. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is the election of 1860, and this is a big election. Some people say that the Civil War was already being started because of things like Bleeding Kansas and John Brown and Nat Turner and other rebellions. And some people point to this election as the cause for the Civil War, one of the biggest causes. Now, in this election, we have four main candidates. We've got Stephen Douglas. We've heard about him before. His big idea is popular sovereignty. He wants the people to be able to choose if they have slaves or not, North or South. Okay. And he was part of the Democrat Party in the North. Abraham Lincoln, also from the North, he's running for the Republicans, and he opposed the expansion of slavery. Some people have the misconception that he wanted to end slavery altogether when he was running for president, and that's not the case. In fact, he said several times during his campaign that he just did not want it to expand out west. He wasn't looking to get rid of it in the South, but he didn't want it to expand out west. So Abraham Lincoln trying to stop the spread of slavery. Now, these other two guys, not to discredit them, but they are not the front runners. This election is mainly between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. But John Breckinridge and John Bell. Breckinridge was running for the Democrats from the South, and he was outright saying that he should protect slavery in any territory. Some people saw this as a threat to the North because they thought that he was trying to bring slavery to the North. Southerners liked him because he was vowing to protect slavery, but he is not going to have much support from the North because of his outright support for slavery. And John Bell, poor John Bell, he just wants everybody to get along. He wants to preserve the Union at all costs, and he doesn't really address the issue of slavery the way that the other candidates are addressing it. So he is kind of lagging behind and just trying to get everybody to get along. Now, in this election, I'll pull up a few graphs here. First off, the popular vote, this pie chart here. If you notice, Abraham Lincoln, he got 39, almost 40% of the popular vote. Okay, so that's good. So popular vote usually indicates what person is going to win the presidency, but not always, but pretty close. Stephen Douglas, pretty close second. Okay, he got about 30% of the votes with the popular vote. Now, the South, of course, their vote is somewhat split between Douglas and Breckinridge because Breckinridge is vowing to support slavery and keep it, while Douglas is basically kind of straddling that line of if you want it, you can have it. We're not going to get rid of it, but we're also not going to force you to have it. So Douglas has an approach that where he's trying to make everybody happy. Breckinridge has the approach of supporting slaves, and Lincoln does not want slavery to expand. Now, this is what makes the South angry. If we look at the electoral votes, Lincoln, 180 votes. Breckinridge, 72. John Bell, 39. Now, Douglas, even though he has 30% of the popular vote, he only gets 12 electoral votes. And this enrages the South. They are so angry about this. This is what really tips the scale for them. They said that this is the government not supporting what the Constitution says. This is them saying that the government is not looking out for the best interest of all people. Now, had he gotten more electoral votes, I don't know what would have happened. We could play the what if game all day, but he theoretically should have had a lot more electoral votes than 12. And since he only had 12, this makes the South super angry and they're ready to leave. Okay. So Lincoln and Douglas are the main opponents in this election. Breckinridge and Bell should have been a distant third and fourth. The southern states did not like Lincoln or what he believed in, and they overwhelmingly supported Douglas, but Lincoln still got elected. Okay. Southerners, they are angry about this, and they said it doesn't matter what our opinions are. The North is going to do whatever they want, and they have too much power. So a lot of people started talking about seceding. And of course, who else but John C. Calhoun in South Carolina is really pushing for this secession. Okay. Now, Lincoln is elected. He's going to be our 16th president. And this is a huge turning point for our country, and a big part of what we're going to see happen moving forward with the Civil War is because of this election. South Carolina does secede, and we're going to talk more about this on the Day 5 notes and what it means for them to secede and the other states that are going to follow suit behind them. But South Carolina officially secedes from the Union, and 6 other states leave the Union right after they do. Lincoln gives his first inaugural address about the Union and how we should preserve the Union, and how he really didn't acknowledge that South Carolina and these other states had seceded. But he is going to treat these states as though they had never left. So we'll talk more about that in the Day 5 notes, and we'll also talk more about that when we cover the Civil War and the Civil War unit. But this is a big turning point here. So looking forward to Day 5 notes. Hopefully y'all are staying engaged. Hopefully you're watching these videos and getting something out of it. If you have any questions, please come see me. Okay. I know it's been kind of crazy lately with everything that's been going on, but I'm here for you. I want to answer your questions. I want to engage in discussion. This is different, but here we are. So let me know if you got questions, comments, anything like that. And y'all have a great day, and I will see y'all soon. Bye-bye.